Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. And today, as part of the Remarriage Club series, I am introducing and interviewing my fellow coach, Laura Swartzbaugh. And Laura and I have been in the same mastermind for like a year now and really experienced a lot together in our businesses over the last year. She has really been a good friend and colleague to me. And I knew she was divorced. So we kind of made the connection that, oh, when I start this series, she for sure needed to be a part of it. So I'm really delighted to bring Laura to you today. Laura, would you please introduce yourself to my listeners?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so totally delighted and honored to be here. I am a life coach for life coaches. Laura Scout Coaching is my business, and I am remarried after having been divorced and just having a fantastic life.
Yes, and we're going to talk about your recent anniversary trip because that looked awesome. Look. But before we get there, let's kind of go back a little bit because you said a little bit about, when we had the prep call, you had talked about how you felt about getting remarried again, how you felt like you didn't deserve love. Can you just kind of tell us a little bit about that story and how that impacted your dating journey?
Yeah. I was married. I was with my first husband for 22 years, met him when I was 18 and was married for 16 years. And he is a person that everybody thinks is like the nicest guy, the greatest guy. And he is a great guy, 100%. But part of that, story in my head made me really feel like I was 100% responsible for the divorce and that I didn't really deserve to be married anymore or even like date. So when I got divorced in 2008, I was really, really down about my own identity and who I was. And the concept of like deserving a great love again, even though that's what I wanted, wasn't something I could even wrap my brain around at that point.
And this was because people saw him as a nice guy or because you initiated the divorce? Like, why did you make that connection that you didn't deserve this? Like, what was it about the divorce that made you feel that way?
I think both the fact that he's a nice guy and like he's not to the outside world, there would be no apparent reason why you would divorce this person. Do you know what I mean? Like we don't really ever understand people's marriages, but I think it's possible that at the time I thought for sure that people were like, you're insane. Like he's a doctor, he's a great father, he's a good guy, he doesn't yell, and all of that was of course what I was thinking. Now I see, but at the time it was that and I totally initiated it. So it was, I felt like I was 100% responsible for just basically ruining my marriage. I see it very differently now. Not that I spend time blaming him, but I just see it as a much more complicated, nuanced story where I was a person who was really struggling with depression at the time and was really just unable to figure out how to be happily married to that person at that time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that concept is really important for my listeners because there is a situation that I have run into with clients multiple times where they meet a nice guy. This is a good guy, but he's not the guy for them.
Yes.
And they have such a hard time saying no to a good guy.
Yes.
It is okay to say no to a good guy.
Yes, there's so many good guys, which I know is something that people who are dating don't think is true, but it's 100% true. I met so many good guys when I was dating who weren't the good guy for me, right? Yeah. So it's you want a quote unquote good guy, a good person, a good human, but you also want a match, right?
Yes, you want the right one for you.
Yeah.
Did you feel guilty? Because I think guilt is what my clients feel when they're like, well, he's taken me on 5 dates. He paid for all of them. He was just really nice. He was just really good. And he wants to continue. And I want to say no. And they feel so much guilt. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about how to deal with that?
Yeah, at the beginning, I did feel a lot of guilt, and then later I didn't. And that's because I just kept working on myself and my own worthiness. At the beginning, I didn't date at all. And then I started dating, but I was just like, I was so desperate. I was just like, I need
Mm.
companionship, right? So I just like I basically went on dates with anyone who like wanted to date me online. Not anyone, that's not true, but just I didn't have a lot of criteria. I didn't have a lot of clarity about who I was looking for at that point, because at that point I was just like still coming from this place of like, I need somebody in my life
Mhm.
to feel like I'm okay. Right. And as I went on my own kind of work and self like improvement, that's a terrible word, but like self discovery, let's call it that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, to kind of understand myself better, I more and more realized not only did I deserve love, but also that I could want marriage, which is something we can talk about. Because at first I didn't even think like, no, why would I want to be remarried? But I was like, when I really looked at it and got honest
Mhm.
with myself, I realized I really wanted to be married. I loved being married. I love being married in the
Yeah.
present tense as well. And so I think then it was easy for me to say no. I remember this one guy in particular that was a total sweetheart, but just absolutely, one date was enough for me to know that there was no need for me to go on any more dates with him. He wasn't my person. And
Mhm.
so it doesn't help them if you're feeling guilty about saying no to a good guy, a nice guy, a sweet guy. It doesn't help them if you keep dating them, if you know in your gut that they're not your person. Because it's not, please don't marry them, right? Like,
Right?
don't marry someone out of guilt. I don't think anyone wants that for their life partner.
Right. No
Right.
one wants
Yeah.
to be
She
married out
married
of
me.
guilt.
Right. Right. Pity. Like, she's a pity wife. Like, she married me because she pitied me.
Oh
No one
my
wants that.
God.
Right. So
Yeah.
you might as well just let them go find their person, right? By
Mhm.
being honest and clear with them. Listen, you're a great guy. And
Yeah.
I had another guy who came to my house, which was totally against my rules. Like, don't come to my house unless you're invited over. I had kids, right? My son was home.
Right.
And I remember going to the front door and walking out on my front stoop and shutting the door and telling him, like, I had already like broken up with him after, 3 dates. So to
Mhm.
me, not really a breakup. But I was like, you're a great guy, but no, you need to
Yeah.
leave. And
Yeah.
I didn't feel like a bad person about doing that. It's just like, no, this relationship, it wasn't even a relationship. I'm using air quotes, which clearly nobody
Mhm.
can see on a podcast. But like it, right? We went on some dates. You're not my person. I wish you the best of luck. Please
Yeah.
leave now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I'm
One of the
calling the
things
police.
I teach my clients is like autonomy. I really try to teach them that listen, you are your person, they are their people.
Yes.
And like just because you've had like these interactions doesn't create this like situation where you're now like suddenly bonded and in obligation to, or they're in obligation to you. It gets really messy when you don't
Yes.
have that clarity and that autonomy and feeling very sovereign in who you are as an individual.
Yes. That's really, really important. I would not have been able to articulate it like that at the time, but that's exactly right. And then
Yeah.
there were people who did the same thing to me who were like, no, you're not my person. And I was like heartbroken, after
Yeah.
3 dates.
Yeah.
But after I had that experience a few times, this is before I found coaching, and I was still just doing my own kind of work to figure this out. And I was working with a therapist who was extremely helpful. It was like, um, I'm okay. They don't want to date me anymore, and I'm okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Losing that attachment to the outcome and that need to like really make it force it to work too early. And
Right. And I was really like, I was the person who was like, at the end of the first date, had already like decided we were getting married and where we were going to live and like furnishing our, condo and all the things
yeah,
in
and
my
actually I
head.
find that happens a lot. Um, what was the shift that took you from being that person who was like falling in love on the very first date to being a lot more healthy as time went on?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I know this is a cliche that people hear all the time, but it was doing my own work on me. and doing really, really, what I would say is it was hard work. And at that time, it was with my therapist, about my own worthiness and about the idea that I was like a whole human being, no matter what. And I was a worthy human being, no matter what. And I deserved love, and I could give myself love. And just doing that work, over and over again. A lot of it at the beginning was healing my mistakes in my marriage, what I saw as my ruining my marriage, and just healing and forgiving and seeing that I wasn't, I never set out with intent to do any of that to my first husband. There was no malice. There was nothing like that. It was a person who was suffering and doing her best. And then later it was much more, turning away from that and looking to the future and looking at what does a whole, like, abundant life look like for me, and giving myself more and more and more love. I mean, I remember my therapist giving me the assignment of my strengths list, and she made me write my strengths. Right. And now I would see that as like evidence, right? I would call that evidence for my brain, almost like an intentional thought kind of evidence, where I'm showing my brain evidence that, like, I'm actually a decent human being. I'm actually an amazing human being. Right. So strengths list. And I still have all of my journals, and just writing out, like, I'm funny, I'm smart, I'm creative. Right. And just doing that work week after week. Now, I didn't, I came from a place of pretty bad depression. And so for a lot of your listeners, it may not be as long of a journey or as hard of a journey. It depends on where they're at in terms of their own kind of wholeness for themselves and love for themselves.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that work of, like, writing your strengths, I have actually used something similar for my clients who have a lot of regret about their marriage. Yeah. So people who were married maybe to someone who was abusive, but they stayed for a long time. And the fact that they even married that kind of a person, they look back and it's almost like they really hate who they were in the marriage.
Yes.
Right.
100%.
And I've, as we've worked together, one of the things I help them do is to go back and retrieve. I call it retrieving your strengths.
Yes.
Because I was like, listen, if you lived with an abusive person for 10, 15 years and you survived and you came out, and now you have this work to do, yes, and maybe those years, a lot of things happened that maybe you didn't want to happen, but look at the fact that you survived it, that you came out of it. And I was like, you were probably a little bit of a badass in that marriage. So let's go back and talk to that girl.
Yes.
Right. And really acknowledge who she was and what she survived, and, the strengths that kept her, resilient and able to actually make the shift. And so it's a similar activity, but I've seen it do a lot of wonders for those who needed to kind of integrate who they were with who they are now and who they want to be in the future. Yeah.
I love that. I do a lot of work with coaches when the second I notice that they're telling me a story about their past, and what I would talk about is their past self, and how she was, a hot mess, and she this and she that, and it's like, as long as we keep those stories about our past self, right, and we're kind of throwing our past self under the bus, it can hold us back in our future and in our current life, right? Because we're believing that, and we're kind of nurturing that story and carrying it around, like, oh, you wouldn't believe I was such a hot mess. Oh my God, I ruined my marriage. Oh my, right? Yeah. And it's like, no, we've got to go back, or we have the opportunity. We don't have to, but we can go back, and we can kind of, like, really love her and admire her.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I think it's so powerful to do that.
Yeah. All right. So I have one more question to you before we get into your online dating stories.
Okay.
Which is, you talked about at a certain point feeling desperate and lonely and wanting companionship, right? And then realizing that you loved marriage. And a lot of my listeners think loving marriage and wanting a new relationship is the same thing as being desperate.
Interesting.
And so
Okay.
I know a lot of people will have a lot of resistance to putting themselves out there, to getting back out there, because they're like, well, I don't want to seem desperate. It seems desperate for me to take charge of my dating relationship, to put it out there that I want a marriage. Wanting a
Yes.
marriage sounds desperate. And there is desperation, but then there's also just wanting something for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Such a good question. Such a good distinction. When I was desperately dating, I felt in the pit of my stomach like there was something off, but I kept going. Right. And so I kind of knew, but I was ignoring my gut, my inner wisdom, whatever you want to call it. Right. Um, and it just didn't feel good. Right. It was just like, I need this. I have to have this. Right. Like almost like a craving to eat something that, like if you're like lactose intolerant and you have a bowl of ice cream, it's just not going to be a good night. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So, but you eat it anyway, because it's like you just want it so badly, but perfectly well, this isn't going to feel good later. Right. And that's kind of how the desperate dating felt. When I started to be okay with the idea that maybe I was a decent human being who deserved not only love for myself, but also love from someone else, and could go after what I want. And the way I love to think about this is like, what would delight me? Right. That's how I talk to my coach clients about this. Is like, what would delight you? So when I started to explore like what would delight me, it was so obvious that what I would be delighted with was getting remarried. And I loved being married. And if I was a decent human being and a worthy human being, then why would I not go for what I really want? Right.
Yeah. So it's like
But
more of
then
a
it
place
didn't
of
feel like,
inspiration.
so I'm sorry, what?
It came from inspiration.
Yes. Yeah. Not like, I have to have this. And even though it's not going to feel good, right? It just
Yes.
feels really different in your body.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, because you've experienced both ends of it. And I always want to like let women know, like, you have permission to like go for, if you want it, you have permission to go for it. And it doesn't mean you're desperate, but then always wanting to clarify,
Yeah.
because relationships are this space where like a lot of things are so muddy. What applies to one
Yeah.
person doesn't apply to the other. And then we use these
Absolutely.
phrases from like different frames of reference.
Yeah. And
So
I just want to add to that it's not a linear, perfect shift, right? So there were times after I had, really started to heal myself where I still had moments of desperation, right? I still had days of desperation. So it doesn't mean like if you still go back to that kind of thinking or feeling, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means your human brain is like doing something familiar. That's all.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. Your level of awareness is just awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's get to the good stuff.
Okay, let's go. Let's go.
So when you decided, okay, I'm gonna get back out there, you dated mostly online, or did you date offline as well?
All online.
All
Yep.
online.
Yep.
And what app did you use?
What app didn't I use? I was on Plenty of Fish. I was on Match. I was on eHarmony, and I was on Hinge, and I was on Bumble. But I really, as I went through the journey, I more and more focused on eHarmony and Match.
Right. And I
Yeah.
ask this question not because I'm trying to tell anyone what app to be on,
Mm-hmm.
because the answers are always such a wide range. To me, that's evidence that it's not the app.
It's not the app. 150%. It's not the app.
Right. And you met your husband on eHarmony.
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
So tell us what happened. How long were you actively dating before you met him?
I was really actively dating for 3 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it worth the wait?
Totally 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I love
And I
that.
decided in 2015 that I was going to meet my husband, my second husband, my next husband, my current husband, as I like to call him. I was going to meet him in 2015, and I did a vision board in January 2015 that was entirely about finding love. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. True story. I still have it. It's right here in my office.
I love that. I just love that you owned that desire. I have a
Yes.
podcast episode. I don't remember what number. That's like, listen, you just own the desire. I want this thing.
Yes. Permission to want is huge, especially for women. It's okay for us to want it.
Yeah.
100%. Okay.
All right. So you made a vision board.
Yes, I did.
Went on all the apps. What happened next?
I it's so funny. I don't remember like the order of the different dudes that I dated, but in August. Oh, it's so interesting. It was August. It might have been like the 19th of August for all I know, which is when we're recording this.
Yeah.
In August, I first saw my now husband on eHarmony, and I checked him out. I loved that he was a father. I loved that he was Italian. I thought he was incredibly handsome, but I also most of all liked his write-up. And I liked eHarmony because I am a former professor and I'm a avid reader, and I'm a total nerd. So I liked eHarmony the best because it has the most words. And I liked the dudes who made who really filled out their profile like fully, so that there was a lot to read, because I love reading. And so I liked everything he wrote, and I liked that he was a good writer, and I loved his pictures. And I winked or smiled at him. I don't remember the terminology on eHarmony anymore because I haven't been on for so long, but I initiated by doing the wink or the smile, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And he wrote back. He like immediately wrote back, not immediately like that second, but like wrote back. And do you want me to keep on going with my story with him?
All of it. We want to hear all
Okay.
the things. We want to hear about him, and then we'll probably go back and hear about some of the other guys. But no, this is good.
Okay. So he wrote back, and I was at the time following a dating coach who I love. Her name's Bella Gandhi, and she is in Chicago. She's a local woman, and she had. I didn't hire her, but I was following her stuff. And one of the things that she talked about was women initiating, but make it so that you indicate your interest, but you're not like writing them an essay, right? Because I could write emails to men for days, right? Super fun for me, but I know not fun for everybody. For me, that's easy. So give them the opportunity to pick up the ball, right? And but show them you're interested, right? Because they're scared too, which I think is easy for us to forget, is that the person on the other side is scared too. And so showing interest first is like A-okay, which like there was a lot of conversation then, and I'm sure there still is in the dating world about should you or shouldn't you initiate. And so I was like 100% initiating all the time, but just that like indication, like, hey, you're cute. I'm looking at you. You're cute. Right. And so he wrote. And then the thing I loved about him is that over the next, I think, probably couple of weeks, it wasn't that long, it was a week or two, we emailed and we had a really substantial email conversation. But then I said, the next thing this coach at the time said to do was to get on the phone, which I had totally been following, because I don't want to go on a date with somebody who can't have a conversation, right? My time is too valuable. And so the phone call screening was something that I valued at the time, because then you could see if they could talk. We had a few lovely conversations, and then he asked me out. So it was like he kept doing the things that I wanted him to do, which I loved. And then we had our first date on, I'm going to cry, September 4th, 15, September 4th, 2015. So it was funny because it was like getting to the end of what I thought was the end of the year, right? August, the 8th month, and I hadn't met him yet. And then
so you made the vision board that same year.
I made it January of 2015, right? But I was like, oh, I'm running out of time. Like it's August. I haven't met him yet. And then I met him, but I didn't know in August that he was the one.
And you'd been dating for 2 years prior to that.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Like seriously dating. I had dated before that, but not like, okay, we're getting serious now.
Yeah.
I had just been like playing.
How long did it take from that first date to when you walked down the aisle? Like when you got married?
We got married in 2018 in August. So under 3 years, but we moved in together a year after we started dating.
Yeah. So that's your first commitment, act of commitment was a year later.
Yes, correct.
Right. Why did
Right.
it take that long? Like, what was your process for kind of moving? And so like within my program, I teach my clients, we have like when you're dating, we have relationship gates. So there's a process for moving from that first date and all of that interest to a commitment. And then when you are in that commitment, there's actually then what we call relationship milestones. So then you define how you move through to like, all right, we're going to seal the deal. So there's just a lot of space to explore even within the relationship.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. So what's your question?
How did you like, what was that journey like for you from when you met, you moved in a year later? Like a lot of stuff happened in that year.
Yeah.
Why did it take a year? You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my son was a senior in high school at the time, and I was living in a suburb that was about 45-minute drive from the suburb he was living in. And he had two young girls who are now teenagers, but the time they were in elementary school. And so I was actually, I had no interest in moving whatsoever or moving in with somebody until my son left for college. And so the timing was, in my mind, wasn't going to, I wasn't going to move in with anybody before about a year from then, because of getting my son launched and off to college. And I took him out to Washington State to college. And I was renting at the time. So our lease was up and all these things happened that it was like perfect timing at that point for us to move in together. During that year, we said, I love you to each other in December, late December. We went on a kind of spontaneous trip to Puerto Rico. And we were in Puerto Rico, and it was just so funny because we were laying on the lounge chairs on the beach, and I knew like he was the one more than I ever have in my life. When we woke up that morning in Puerto Rico, we got in late at night the night before. We woke up in the morning, we looked out the window at the beach, and we turned towards each other and we were like, who's going to get the coffee and who's going to go claim our chairs? And it was like we both knew those were the two most important things we could possibly do in that moment.
It's like telepathic waves.
Right.
This is
like
this
coffee,
is the plan.
Chairs, right? Beach, right? And so I don't even remember who did what, but we're on those chairs with our coffee, and he says to me, when are we going to say it? But I didn't hear him. And I was like, what? And he's like, never mind. And then like, you know, when you don't hear what somebody says and then later you realize you did hear it. So then later I realized, oh, when are we going to say it? And so then we went on this walk on the beach. This is a true story. I'm not making this up. In Puerto Rico, it starts to rain. I swear to God, it's like a Nicholas Sparks novel / movie. I'm not kidding. And we get under this tree. And that's when we first said we love each other.
Oh my gosh, that is so romantic.
It was extremely romantic.
Oh my gosh, I love, you have the beach, you have the tree, you have the rain.
I know, the rain. It was so beautiful. And it rained like every day in Puerto Rico. It's the only time I've ever been there. It was so beautiful. But you know, it's like raining for 10 minutes and then it's sunny again. So it wasn't like Chicago rain, let me just say. So it's more romantic because of that.
Yes, for sure. Beaches are the best.
Yeah, they're the best.
Yeah. So when you met him, like having been dating that long, and you were, it sounds like you were consistent. You were like out there, I'm looking for this guy. Like, and this is one of those, you'll understand when I articulate it. For my clients who haven't met the one, who've been dating for 6 months or dating for a year, or like doing the work and they're practicing their skills and getting better at it, but they haven't met the one yet. There's a place where you are in your brain when you haven't met the one that it's so hard to imagine actually being in that place where you've met the one.
Yes.
A lot of the work I do with them is to try to take them there. I'm like, listen, let's get there in your brain. What was that shift for you? Like, how did you go from, or let me ask, did you get to that space where it was done and you totally believed you were going to find him before you got there?
No, I don't think I had that capability or that capacity at that point.
Yeah.
I think I, you know, partially believed it, but I wasn't like in total belief or anything.
Right.
I think I believed it was possible.
And sometimes that's enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes just believing it's possible is enough.
Right.
Right.
For me,
but when you're in that place where it's like,
shift.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're in that place where it's like, this isn't going to happen, I can't even see this happening.
Yes.
That holds you back.
Yes. That holds you back.
Yeah.
Right. And
What's
it's a
your
muscle, right? So you can develop, I mean, I know you do this work with your clients, like you can develop the belief in that possibility. You can, it's just like that strengths list thing. You can be like, well, it happens for other people. Other people find their person, right? Like you can just start there. Like it's theoretically possible that I could find someone because humans find each other.
Sure do.
Right?
And there's a lot of humans.
There's a lot of humans, a lot of them.
All right. So let's go back to your dating stories. Like, what is the most, I guess, the weirdest thing that happened, or we could also go with the funniest, the funniest situation you had.
I don't have a lot of funny. Okay, I have one funny story and I have one weird story. So the funny story, and it's kind of like now I just feel so much compassion for this guy, but at the time, I was the only one in my book club who was divorced. I have this book club I'm in. It's like 25 women from my old neighborhood in the suburb I used to live in. And shout out to Oak Park, Illinois. Woo! So they were all married for the most part and had been in their marriages for a very long time. So they loved hearing my dating stories, right? Because they're totally just like, oh my God, how are you even doing this? This is so crazy. And so this one guy, I went on the first date with him, and I'm not making this up, people. He had this giant gift bag, like as big as a suitcase with him. Okay. It was big. And I saw it and I was just like, well, that's okay, whatever. That's weird. Like he was kind of hiding it. And then we got seated by the hostess we were having dinner, and we're sitting in a, like at the restaurant, you know, there's like a wall with the bench all along the wall. So you can sit against the wall facing the restaurant or facing the person. And he chose to sit next to me on the bench. So we're both facing the restaurant. He's sitting next to me, which is a little bit of a surprise. Right. And I didn't speak up or say anything like, could you sit across from me, please? And then he proceeded to tell me that they were presents for me. And he had wrapped 13 presents for me.
Wow.
They were mostly from Walgreens, which is a drugstore. I guess everybody knows Walgreens at this point, right? And it was like based on a phone conversation. So he had listened, like if he had been my person, this would have been amazing, right? Because like he had listened to everything I said and like taken it and run with it and gone and bought presents. But the fact of the matter was we had never met, right? And so he went to Walgreens, he bought all these presents for me. He like bought a bottle of wine. I don't know if that was from Walgreens, but he like changed the label. Like he printed out a label with like my name on it. And he referenced Ann Arbor, where I used to live, and like all of these things that I told him. So it was like way too much for me.
That was a lot.
Right. It could work for somebody, but for me, it was like, it wasn't stalker, but it was like, you spent too much time.
I don't know. That sounds a little stalkerish to me.
Right. And so we had a dinner, and I knew immediately when that happened. He wanted me to open them, and I opened them. That was like before we even, got our first glass of wine or anything, or our appetizers. And I knew immediately he wasn't my I was just like, this is too much. And, maybe now I would have the, maybe I would choose now to just be like, dude, like, and get up and leave. But at the time I didn't. Very much a recovering people pleaser. So had dinner, it was fine. But the whole time I'm just thinking, no, right? Like he's a super nice guy. No. Right. It's like, you can't be that excited about me before you meet me in person.
Right.
Like that was my thought. Right.
Yeah.
So that was like bizarre. And I remember telling my book club, and they just were like rolling over laughing because they're just like, because he got me like shot glasses, like just the weirdest things.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's almost like you told him all this about yourself, and he's like, okay, great. If I check the boxes on everything she said, then I will be the one, versus just being who he is.
Exactly. Yeah.
And letting you see who he is.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And I do remember he asked if he could walk me to my car when we came outside the restaurant. And I said, no. I was like, no, that's enough. Yeah. So, so I don't know whatever happened to him.
No, we don't. It's fine.
Yeah. I hope he found his person. Oh, I did have one other one that was pretty amusing. Oh dear. I was dating this guy for, I don't know, not that long, few weeks, several weeks, right? It had been several weeks. And I realized he wasn't the person and I was ready to break up with him. And so he had given me, he was really into safety, and he'd given me like a winter safety kit for my cars, like if you ever get like stuck in the snow or anything. And so I asked him if I could come over. He said yes. So I drove over and I was at his front door holding the safety kit, and he was sick. He had a cold. And he saw it in my hands when he opened the door, and he was like, "You're not breaking up with me, are you?" Because he knew he like realized I was returning it. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, he starts to cry. He was a tall man. He starts to cry. He has a cold. So he's like, his nose is running. And he tells me, like, he gets down on his knees. He tells me he'll stop being a Republican. Like,
wow.
Yeah. Like and I was just
He was
like,
ready to give it all up.
He was, I mean, it was just, yeah, it was just a lot.
Yeah.
And I felt genuinely, I still feel compassion for him, but like at the time I was just like, what is happening?
Right. And I love that you have those stories, because I think a lot of times, and one of the things I try to teach my clients is like, you can't run that other person's journey for them. And you have to value your journey over their journey.
Yes. Oh my God, that's so good.
Yeah, like your journey is your responsibility and their journey is theirs.
Yes. Oh, that's so good.
And like, they'll be fine. They're adults.
Yeah.
They are on an app, which means they have an idea what they're getting into. Well, at least they should, if they don't. Yeah.
Right.
Some of my listeners and clients have concerns about like some of these interactions that are like awkward or weird or like uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Could you just talk to them about the fact that, like, how did you, and this is a phrase that we use in the coaching world, have your own back through all of those interactions?
Yeah. Yeah, what I would say is like, you're uncomfortable anyway. You're uncomfortable thinking about it. You're uncomfortable knowing it's not the right person. You're uncomfortable, whatever it is, it's like, take the action for what you want, right? It's going to be uncomfortable either way because you're already thinking about it, right?
That's so good.
So you might as well feel uncomfortable while you're taking action and taking steps and doing the things, having the hard conversations, breaking up with, saying no to the date, whatever it is, right? For your journey, because you've got your journey, girl, and it's important.
Yes, yes, that's so true. Valuing the journey, valuing where you're going over the current discomfort.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, they were awkward, super awkward, but totally worth it.
Yeah.
Totally worth it.
Yeah. All right. So back to your current relationship with the handsome Italian.
Yes, my hot Italian husband. Woo! He is so hot.
What has been the most surprising thing for you about being married, blending a family? Like, what did you not expect that like you've had to experience? Good or bad? Like, it could be something amazing. It doesn't have to be like challenging.
Yeah. We talk in the coaching world about life being 50-50, right? And so I really thought when I started dating my beautiful husband, that when I got there, right, when I got to a certain point, I was going to be happy. I still believed that at that time, right? All the time, right? Happy all the time. Like that's, you cross this threshold, in my clients, a lot of times it's about how much money they've made or how many clients they have, or, whatever, having ideal clients. And we'll get to this point where everything will just be rainbows and daisies, right? And that's just not true, right? Life is still super messy. We have been through so much together since we've been married. Since we've been married, I had a stroke and we had the global pandemic. We had George Floyd and all of the, current ongoing racial injustice. We've had, everything that's happened in the world and in our personal lives because of my stroke. And he's had some health issues. So we've faced so many challenges. And so it's like, I am so grateful to have him in my life and I love being married to him. And life is still 50-50. Life is still filled with joy and filled with grief.
Yeah.
And so I'm really thrilled that I have a partner in my life to go through all that it is together. I feel like 2018 was just like the most amazing year in my life. I got certified to be a coach. I retired from 27 years as an educator. I got married. I went on the most amazing honeymoon on earth to Italy for 2 weeks.
Nice.
I started coaching. I started my business. It was working, all of the things. And then in 2019, I had a stroke. And then in 2020 happened.
2020 happened.
No explanation needed.
Right. So
right.
knowing that life is 50-50 that way, like, and I think, like you said, a lot of us, especially when we were younger or before the divorce or when we're first dating, we still think it's going to be the fairy tale. Like we're going to find Prince Charming. And then we're like, where is Prince Charming? So you're saying you found the hot, handsome Prince Charming, all of that. And life is still kind of like this journey that you're on. Like you're in love, you're happy. I saw your anniversary pictures. You just went on, how many years is this? 3?
3, yes.
So your third, and where did you go for that vacation?
We went to St. Michael's, Maryland, which is a really interesting small town, beautiful on the Chesapeake Bay. And then we went to Washington, D.C. and we went to the National Museum of African American History, which was so amazing.
Yeah, like I saw all the pictures. You guys did a lot of stuff. You looked so in love. Like it's the perfect ending to the fairy tale, but you're still living life as humans.
Exactly. I mean, we have a blended family. We have teenage girls. We have, my daughter who's living here in the city of Chicago and working, and my son who's living out in Seattle. And, so we're still parenting. We have a dog who's 13, blind, has dementia, wakes us up every night having to go, I don't know what he's thinking, but I mean, we've still got all, all the things.
Like looking back, like obviously you pick the right person for you, the right partnership. But for someone who's like still looking for clarity around, like, what are some qualities that are just really good to have in a person that I want to do life with? Like, if you ever had a stroke, you ever had to have surgery, like I had to have surgery last year.
Yes.
What
I remember.
So for those listening, I showed up to the first call of our mastermind lying in a hospital bed after just having had surgery. So
I'll never forget it as long as
that's how my hustle goes.
I was going to say, that's how you roll. You're like, let's do this.
Yeah. So like looking for clarity on what does it mean to find a partner? And I have a module in my program that's like partner, not prince. Like we're not looking for Prince Charming, but we do want a true partner. For you, what are the qualities of that true partner?
Yeah. One of the things that coach I mentioned before that I had been following that she talked about was, how do you feel when you're with him? And that was probably the best question for me at that time, that guided me then. And I still think that's a great question. How do I feel when I'm with them? Now I know a lot more about my brain and about my emotions and my thoughts, but I still think it's a really good question as like a gut check question. It's like, how does this person make me feel? And while he absolutely makes me laugh and makes me feel beautiful and makes me feel loved, all of which are delightful, at the bottom line is that I feel safe and I feel calm. And I am not a calm person, as you well know. I am a very animated, high energy person. And one of the things that struck me on our very first date was it's almost like if it's cool outside and you have like a bonfire or a fire pit and you want to get closer to the fire, like it just feels good to have that warmth radiating on you. That's how he felt for me. It felt calming, right? And I was a person who dated and was really driven by the excitement of the date. And it's not that I'm not saying I wasn't excited to date him, but it wasn't the like predominant emotion was like, oh my God, he's so hot. Oh my God. Like, oh, I hope he called. Like, it wasn't this frenetic energy. It was much more like this, just a good feeling of like well-being almost.
Yes. Well-being is such a good emotion.
Yeah.
fulfillment, satisfaction versus
Yes.
passion and excitement, which you want passion and excitement, but you don't want to live on passion and excitement.
Exactly. Right. It would be
Yeah.
like the same thing, like if, hustle in your business versus like business where you just are going from a belief, right?
Mhm.
Where you just have that underlying foundation of, I've got this. It's kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Calm is such a good word. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that. I always want to give my listeners like the cues, because there's not one list that
No,
you can
there is
check off,
not.
but it's a lot
No.
of coding your intuition, retraining your intuition so that it can start to pick up on some of these more subtle cues that let you know if a person is a safe person or not a safe person, or even your person. So thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your story
Oh
so
my gosh.
openly.
I know that if I could have had you as my coach then, it would not have taken me 3 years.
It would not
Like,
have taken 3 years,
no,
but
no.
look at where you got the hot
Yeah,
Italian.
it's
So
it's
you
all
know
good.
what?
But I'm
It's
just
all
saying,
good.
like, I'm just saying, listening to you, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I almost, not that I ever want to go through it again, because I don't,
Right?
but
I hear you. I hear you.
but it would have
My
been cool to do it with you.
Yes, yes, it would. Thank you so much for your sharing so much, Laura. I know that like you and I are going to be hanging out on the internet. But before we say goodbye, I would love for you to tell my listeners where they can find you, spell out your social media for those who just want to write it down instead of going to the
Yeah.
show notes. Tell us again who you work with, how you help them, um, and the best way to work with you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Laura Swartzbaugh, but my company is Laura Scout Coaching. It's Laura. Scout is Scout. It's named after my dog. It's a lot easier than Swartzbaugh.
Yeah,
And
it's true.
I'm on Facebook at Laura Scout Coaching. I'm on Instagram at Laura Scout Coaching. And I work with coaches only. I'm a life coach for life coaches. And I help them I help them. I'm
Yeah,
so sorry.
you help them not be crazy is the way I say it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I help them clean up their thinking and
Yeah.
become who they want to become faster by changing the way they think about who they are. Right. So it's all about your
Yes.
thoughts about yourself. That's kind of the underlying simplest way to get where you're going faster. And
Yeah.
so,
Because the
and I
brain
do
will
it in a
always have
group
drama.
setting.
It doesn't
Yeah,
matter what you're
always.
doing. But you might be a coach, you still have, like, I still have coaches, right?
100%.
You
Me too,
always will
baby.
have
Me
thoughts.
too.
You will
Yeah.
always have doubts that come up, uncertainties that come up. And we all need,
Yes.
I firmly believe that everyone should have a coach.
I could not agree with you more. It makes my life so much better because my brain wants to keep on going down all the crazy little roads that it thinks are important. And they're not. They're just not.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for sharing your story. It is so inspirational. I know a lot of my listeners are going to really enjoy hearing your journey and going along with you and really evaluating their emotions, and seeing where they can make some adjustments around that. So
Oh,
thank you for coming. For everyone listening, reach out to Laura, find out more about her work, follow her on social media. And I want to thank you all for your time and attention, and I will see you next time.